It was a quiet night at sea, the kind that made the world feel endless. The water stretched into the dark, smooth as glass, and the moonlight shimmered faintly across the waves. On board the massive destroyer Horizon, the crew moved in silence. Only the hum of the engines and the soft clicks from the radar screens broke the stillness. They had been out there for weeks, patrolling the disputed waters where tension often floated heavier than the mist. The air always smelled faintly of oil and salt, and the men had grown used to the low mechanical rhythm that came from deep within the ship's heart. For some, that sound had become almost comforting, proof that the engines were alive, and so were they. The captain sat quietly in his chair in the control room, sipping cold coffee that had lost its flavor hours ago. His eyes stayed fixed on the digital map glowing in front of him. He didn't speak much. He didn't need to. His presence was enough to keep the crew focused. Years at sea had carved calm into his face, but deep inside he was tired. He knew every creak of the ship, every echo of the metal floor, and every expression on his men's faces. They were all holding on to discipline, but he could sense the unease building. At the radar station, the operator, a young man with dark circles under his eyes, kept staring at the green screen. The slow circular sweep of the radar line had become hypnotic after long hours of watching. Nothing had appeared for days, just empty waves and faint signatures of faraway cargo ships. He wanted something to happen, but he also dreaded it. It was just past midnight when the silence broke. A faint blip appeared near the edge of the radar. The operator blinked, unsure. It flickered for a second, then disappeared. He leaned forward, adjusting the frequency dial, thinking it might be static interference. Then it came again, faint but real this time, pulsing once, then vanishing. His stomach tightened. "Sir," he said, his voice uncertain. "There's something on the radar." The captain turned his head slowly, standing from his chair. "Show me." Everyone in the control room leaned closer as the radar sweep circled again. Nothing, just the calm hum of machinery. The operator replayed the recording from a few seconds earlier, and there it was. One small, sharp signal that didn't match any commercial or allied vessel pattern. It had appeared from nowhere. The captain frowned. "Could be interference," he said quietly, though he didn't sound convinced. He checked the coordinates, then looked out through the wide window of the bridge. The night was pitch black, not a single light on the horizon. The sea was calm, but there was a strange heaviness in the air, as if the ocean was holding its breath. He told the crew to maintain course and ordered the radar operator to keep scanning. But even as the captain walked back to his seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't the signal itself, it was how it felt. Like being watched. The operator nodded, pretending to focus, but his hands were trembling slightly. He had seen false readings before, storms, drifting debris, technical errors, but this one had felt different. Too sharp, too precise. Minutes passed, then an hour. Nothing. The blip didn't return. The crew tried to settle back into routine. One of the engineers cracked a quiet joke, and a few tired smiles spread across the room. But the tension didn't go away. The sound of boots tapping on the metal floor echoed louder than usual, and every creak from the ship's frame made heads turn. Around 2 a.m, the captain made his way down to the lower decks. He walked through the narrow corridors where the air felt heavier and warmer. A few crew members nodded to him as he passed, pretending not to show their nerves. Down in the engine room, the chief engineer was checking pressure valves. "All steady, sir," he said. But his tone carried something else, worry maybe. Everyone could feel it. Back in the control room, the radar operator was still staring at the screen. He hadn't taken a break. He didn't want to miss anything. He turned down the lights around his station to see better, and in the dim glow of the radar he felt his heartbeat syncing with the rhythmic sweep of the signal arm. Then it happened again, a faint pulse barely there, same spot, same pattern. His breath caught. "Sir, it's back," he called out, louder this time. The captain returned quickly, followed by 2 officers. The radar screen showed a blip appearing and vanishing in short bursts, moving slightly closer each time before disappearing again. It didn't behave like a normal vessel. The pattern was irregular, almost as if someone out there was scanning them. "Mark the coordinates," the captain ordered. "Any visual contact?" The crew member at the deck lookout replied through the intercom. "Negative, sir." Nothing visible. Just open water. The captain's eyes narrowed. "Shut off external lights. Radio silence. Keep all sensors running passively only. Within seconds, the destroyer went dark. The bright decks faded into dim shadows. The only light left came from inside the bridge, faint reflections bouncing off metal and glass. The sea outside looked endless and lifeless. The silence felt heavier now. No one spoke above a whisper. The sound of the ocean seemed louder without the hum of auxiliary systems. It was just the waves, the wind, and the quiet tension that crawled under everyone's skin. The operator checked again. The blip had stopped moving. It was just there, hovering in the same area. Watching, waiting, the captain stood still, his jaw tight. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought was clear in everyone's mind. If they could see that signal, then maybe someone else could see theirs too. Hours passed. The sky outside started to shift from black to dark blue as dawn approached. The first faint line of light appeared across the horizon, turning the sea into a dull silver mirror. The radar remained quiet. It was as if whatever had been out there had vanished into thin air. The crew began to relax a little, though no one truly felt safe. The captain ordered a systems check to make sure everything was functioning correctly. The engineer confirmed all sensors were fine, which meant that whatever signal they'd picked up was real. That made it worse. Later that morning, as the sun climbed higher, the captain stood alone on the upper deck. The wind brushed against his face and the waves glistened under the sunlight. It looked peaceful, almost beautiful, but he knew better than to trust calm seas. He replayed the radar data on his handheld screen. The blip had lasted less than 5 seconds the first time, and 8 the second. The intervals between appearances were too deliberate to be coincidence. It reminded him of old training exercises, how submarines would ping once or twice to confirm a target before going silent again. He didn't want to alarm the crew further, so he logged it as a possible false signal for now, but inside he knew something was coming. By noon, the ship continued its patrol. The crew tried to distract themselves with routine maintenance. Some sat quietly, writing notes or cleaning equipment, but their minds were still stuck on the radar signal. Every few minutes, someone would glance toward the control room, waiting to see if it would appear again. In the evening, when the captain gathered the senior officers for a short meeting, the topic came up immediately. The communication officer mentioned faint static interference on the secure channels. Not enough to disrupt messages, but unusual. Another reported that the sonar had picked up faint underwater echoes, too weak to identify but distinct from natural sea sounds. The captain stayed calm. "We stay alert," he said. "No transmissions unless necessary. We're not alone out here." The men nodded silently. That night, as the sun disappeared and darkness swallowed the horizon once more, the ship glided quietly across the sea. Inside the control room, the radar line kept spinning, round and round, showing nothing. But everyone knew the sea could hide many things. Far out in the darkness, beyond the edge of human sight, something else moved silently too. Something that had been watching them, studying them and waiting. The crew didn't know it yet, but the faint signal they'd picked up was the beginning of something much larger. Something that would soon shake every person on board and send waves of panic through an entire fleet. The next morning started quietly, but something about the air felt heavier. The sea was calm, the sun was bright, yet the crew of the Horizon couldn't shake off the uneasiness from the night before. Everyone remembered the strange radar signal, the one that appeared and disappeared like a ghost. No one talked about it openly, but it was in their eyes, in their silence, in the way they moved slower than usual. The captain stood on the bridge, looking through his binoculars. The horizon stretched endlessly, blue and peaceful. Nothing seemed out of place, yet his instincts told him that danger was near. Years of experience had taught him that the ocean hides things too well. Down in the control room, the radar operator kept scanning the screens. The signal hadn't appeared again, but he didn't feel relieved. In fact, the silence of the radar made him more anxious. It was like waiting for thunder after seeing lightning. By afternoon, the heat made the metal decks warm to the touch. Some crew members worked outside, tightening cables and cleaning equipment, but their minds were elsewhere. Conversations were short. A few men joked nervously about how quiet everything was. Too quiet, one said, forcing a laugh that didn't sound real. Around that time, strange noises started coming through the communication system. It began as faint static, soft broken sounds that came and went. The radio officer tried to adjust the frequencies, thinking it was just interference, but then amid the crackle came something different, short bursts of coded signals repeating at uneven intervals. They didn't match any of their known communication channels. "Sir," the radio officer said carefully, "we're picking up unidentified transmissions. Not strong, but they're there." The captain walked over and listened. The sounds were faint, distorted, but there was a pattern. It wasn't random noise. Someone out there was sending signals, someone close enough to reach them. He exchanged a silent look with his second in command. No words were needed. They both knew this wasn't good. By evening, the sun began to set and a soft orange glow spread across the sea. The light made everything look beautiful, calm and harmless, but everyone on board felt the opposite. The crew ate their meals in silence. Even the usual chatter and laughter were missing. Every sound, the clatter of dishes, the hum of engines, the low murmur of voices seemed sharper, as if the ship itself was listening. Later that night, just before darkness fully took over, one of the lookout officers reported seeing something strange, faint lights flickering on the horizon far away, like small moving stars near the waterline. They weren't steady. They blinked in and out, shifting positions. The captain ordered the lights on horizon to be dimmed again. The crew moved quietly, switching off unnecessary systems. Within minutes, the massive ship turned almost invisible in the dark sea. Only the red emergency lamps glowed faintly along the hallways. The lookout kept watching through his binoculars. The faint lights in the distance seemed to drift slowly, as if several ships were moving together, but they weren't using normal navigation lights. They were dim, controlled, hidden. That was what made them suspicious. The report reached the captain immediately. He didn't say much, only one command: silent running. No signals, no transmissions. Keep the engines at minimum noise. A heavy silence fell over the entire ship. Every man knew what that order meant. It wasn't just about avoiding attention, it was about survival. Inside the control room, the atmosphere was tense. The low red lights made the space feel like a cave, filled with shadows and quiet breathing. Every small movement echoed. The radar screen showed nothing unusual, yet everyone could feel that something was out there, watching. The sonar operator switched to passive mode, listening to the sounds beneath the water. What he heard made his heart race, a distant hum, rhythmic and steady, like the heartbeat of another engine under the waves. "Contact underwater," he whispered. "It's faint, but it's there." The captain moved closer. "Direction?" "Southwest, sir." "Moving slowly, could be. Tracking us." The words hung in the air like smoke. No one spoke for a moment. The captain's voice was calm but sharp. "Keep listening. Do not respond. If they don't know our position exactly, we'll keep it that way." Down below, in the sleeping quarters, the men were restless. Some pretended to sleep, others whispered quietly. Rumors started spreading fast. Talk of enemy submarines, secret fleets, and invisible watchers. Every noise from the hull made someone flinch. The youngest sailor couldn't take it anymore. He got up and went to the observation deck, where he stood looking at the vast darkness. The sea was completely still, but under that stillness he could feel a presence. The kind of feeling you get when you know someone's eyes are on you, even if you can't see them. Just past midnight, the radar operator saw something again. Small signals, moving faintly across the edge of the display. They came and went like shadows sliding in and out of the mist. "Multiple contacts, very faint," he said quietly. "Not solid enough for confirmation, but they're there." The captain didn't need further proof. His instincts screamed that they were being watched from all sides. He ordered the ship to change direction slightly, to move away from the suspected zone without making it obvious. The engines turned softly, barely making a sound. The horizon began to drift into a new course, keeping its lights dim and systems quiet. The ocean was dark and endless, but the tension made it feel small, almost claustrophobic. For hours they moved like that, slow and silent. The only sounds were the soft creaks of the hull and the faint vibration of the engines. Then came the whisper. Through the static-filled radio, a faint burst of sound, a coded transmission sharper and clearer than before. The communications officer froze. He didn't recognize the pattern, but he knew it wasn't friendly. It was a signal, a kind of message, maybe between enemy ships. He quickly muted the receiver and turned to the captain. "They're talking to each other," he said softly. The captain nodded slowly. "They found something out here. Maybe us." No one wanted to say the word enemy, but it was there, heavy in every mind. Minutes turned into hours. The crew stayed alert. eyes fixed on screens, ears tuned to every sound. The radar stayed blank, but the sonar kept picking up occasional faint echoes. The ocean was alive with hidden movements. Around 3 in the morning, the engineer reported something unusual. The ship's magnetic sensors were being disturbed. A sign that strong electronic equipment was operating nearby. It wasn't natural. The captain looked out the window again. The sea was pitch dark, but he could sense the presence of other vessels somewhere out there. He could almost feel the weight of their engines pressing through the water. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally he said, "We're surrounded." The officers looked at him, unsure if they heard him right. But deep down they knew he was right. He turned back to the radar. "They haven't locked on yet. They're scanning, waiting, testing us." The realization hit everyone like cold air. This wasn't just an accidental encounter. Whoever was out there knew exactly where to look. Outside, the sea remained quiet, but the darkness seemed thicker now. The stars above looked dimmer, as if even the sky was holding its breath. In the lower deck, one of the sailors whispered to another, "It feels like we're ghosts, drifting in someone else's territory." The other nodded silently. Time moved painfully slow. The captain ordered the crew to stay ready for emergency action. He didn't want to engage, but he knew that if things went wrong, they'd have to fight for survival. The youngest radar operator whispered to his partner, "What if they attack first?" His partner didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, watching the green line spin in circles, hoping it would stay empty. Then, as dawn approached again, the first light appeared across the horizon. The golden line of sunlight spread slowly across the waves, revealing nothing but calm water. But the crew knew better. The ocean was hiding something. When the captain stepped outside onto the deck, he looked at the calm surface and said quietly, "They're close. Closer than we think." Below the water, the sonar picked up another faint sound, closer this time, clearer. A deep vibration, unmistakable. The officer looked at the captain and whispered, "Sir, that's not natural movement. That's an engine. They're tracking us." The captain took a slow breath. His face showed no fear, but his voice carried the weight of it when he said, "Prepare the crew." No one panics. Not yet. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning. The strange signals, the hidden movements, the coded whispers, they were leading up to something far more dangerous. The sea had turned into a silent battlefield, and the horizon had just become the target. The morning after that long, tense night felt strange. The sea looked peaceful, but everyone aboard the Horizon knew it was just an illusion. The crew had barely slept. The dark circles under their eyes showed it clearly. No one complained, though. Everyone knew that something serious was unfolding, and they couldn't afford to relax. The captain stood quietly on the bridge, staring at the endless water. It was hard to believe that just beneath that calm surface, machines and men from another fleet could be lurking, hidden by the ocean's silence. The morning light was soft and golden, but it didn't bring comfort. It only revealed how empty and wide the sea was, and how alone they were. The communication officer came forward, holding a small headset. "Sir," he said softly, "there's still static on our encrypted channels. I think someone is sweeping the frequencies." The captain didn't look surprised. "Keep the main radio silent," he said firmly. "If they're scanning, they'll catch any open signal." He turned to the radar operator next. The young man had been at his station since dawn, eyes fixed on the glowing green screen. "Anything?" the captain asked. The operator shook his head. "Nothing clear." But he hesitated. "There's something strange. Every time I increase the gain, I get faint distortions, like there's movement beyond the scan range. It's not consistent, but it's there." The captain frowned slightly. He leaned over the console, watching the faint shadows flicker near the edge of the radar's circle. It was like seeing ghosts dancing in the fog. "Could be decoys," he muttered. "Or interference from a cloaked vessel." He straightened, his mind running through possibilities. Then he gave a quiet order. "Prepare to launch a recon drone. I want visual confirmation." Within minutes, the crew was ready. The small aerial drone sat on the rear deck, humming softly as its systems came online. The operator input coordinates and the captain gave a final nod. The drone lifted off smoothly, rising into the bright sky and gliding out over the endless sea. Everyone in the control room gathered around the monitor showing the drone's live feed. The view was breathtaking. the horizon shrinking behind it, surrounded by sparkling waves. For a while nothing appeared. Just miles of open water stretching in every direction. Then, about 20 minutes into the flight, something appeared in the distance. A faint shape, too low and too large to be a cloud. The drone camera zoomed in, struggling to focus through the glare. The outlines became clearer, several dark masses moving slowly across the water, half hidden by the haze. "Pause the feed," the captain said sharply. The image froze on screen, showing the faint silhouettes of ships. They were in formation. Their angles, structure, and arrangement were unlike any known commercial vessels. These were warships. The silence in the control room was complete. "Count them," the captain said quietly. The technician zoomed further and counted, his voice shaking slightly. "At least 7. Maybe 8. Moving together. Low radar profile. Probably using stealth plating." The captain studied the image. The enemy fleet was out there and not far, not hidden anymore. They had been sailing in a wide arc, slowly closing in, and by the looks of it, the horizon was right in the center of their search area. He knew what this meant. The enemy hadn't fired yet, which meant they weren't sure of Horizon's exact position, but if they were this close, it was only a matter of time. The captain ordered the drone to climb higher and return immediately before it could be spotted. The screen flickered as the camera view turned back toward the horizon. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then the feed went dark. "Signal lost," the technician said. "It's gone." The captain closed his eyes for a second. That could only mean one thing. The drone had been detected and destroyed. No one spoke. The silence in the control room felt heavy, almost suffocating. Every man there knew what that meant. The enemy knew something was out here. Moments later, the ship's sonar operator stiffened. "Sir, incoming active pulse. High intensity." The captain turned instantly. "Direction? Bearing 212. It's a scan, sir. They're using long-range sonar." The realization hit like a punch to the chest. The enemy fleet was searching for them, and now their sonar waves had reached the horizon. A shrill alarm echoed through the control room. Lights flashed red. The radar screen spiked with new signals. "Contact confirmed," the operator shouted. "Multiple returns, and they've locked onto us." The word sent a shock through the crew. The noise of footsteps filled the deck as men rushed to their stations. Panic spread fast, no matter how hard they tried to control it. "Enemy sensors have detected a human warship," the officer called out over the intercom. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Everyone froze. It felt unreal, those words, that confirmation. The horizon had been exposed. The captain's voice cut through the chaos. "Battle stations. Full defensive readiness, but do not fire unless fired upon." His tone was firm but calm, the kind of voice that gave strength even in fear. The crew scrambled to obey, securing hatches, activating defensive shields, and powering up the engines. Below deck, the engineers worked at lightning speed, redirecting power to the critical systems. The engine room was filled with heat, sweat, and tension. One wrong move, one loud sound, and their exact location would be locked in. The captain knew what they were up against. The enemy fleet outnumbered them, and from the signals, at least 2 of those ships were destroyers like theirs, maybe even larger. Direct confrontation would mean suicide. Their only chance was to stay calm and quiet, but fear doesn't listen to reason. The younger sailors looked terrified. The sound of alarms, the flashing red lights, and the thought of unseen ships surrounding them made their hearts pound. Some whispered prayers under their breath. One technician accidentally dropped a wrench, the metallic clang echoing through the silent corridors. Everyone flinched. In the control room, the radar operator tried to stay focused. "Sir, they're moving closer in about 8 nautical miles now. 7, 6. His voice shook slightly. The captain placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Breathe. Stay with me." The operator nodded quickly, forcing himself to concentrate. The sonar pinged again, louder, stronger. They were being scanned in real time. The entire ship vibrated faintly under the pressure of the sound waves. It was like hearing the heartbeat of the ocean itself, but this time it wasn't natural. It was mechanical, precise, and threatening. "Sir, their formation's changing," another officer reported. "They're spreading out. This looks like they're surrounding us." The captain's eyes narrowed. "They've confirmed we're here." His mind raced through the options. They could dive into deeper waters to hide under thermal layers, or they could accelerate and try to outrun detection. but both choices carried risk. Moving might make more noise. Staying still made them a target. He made the hardest choice of all. Hold position. Engines to minimum thrust. Let them come closer, but stay silent. The crew followed orders. The ship slowed to a near stop, floating quietly in the dark water. The sound of their own breathing seemed too loud. Minutes passed like hours. The sonar showed faint movements all around them, enemy ships tightening their circle. The tension was unbearable. Every crew member could feel their pulse racing. Then, suddenly, one of the screens lit up with an incoming signal. A short, sharp ping, a direct communication attempt. The communication officer looked at the captain. "They're hailing us, sir." "Don't answer," the captain said immediately. "Stay dark." The enemy's message repeated twice, then went silent. They were testing, trying to confirm a response. The horizon gave none. Finally, after several long minutes, the sonar readings began to drift apart. The enemy ships were adjusting formation again, spreading wider, searching, confused. Maybe their detection wasn't perfect after all. The crew didn't relax, but they started to breathe again. The captain didn't speak, just stared at the horizon outside. The sea was still quiet, still pretending to be peaceful. But now every man on that ship knew what was beneath it, a shadow of war waiting to strike. He walked slowly to the viewing glass and whispered, "They've seen us, but they're not sure yet. We still have time." His second-in-command stepped beside him and said quietly, "What if they confirm?" The captain looked straight ahead, his expression steady though his eyes carried the weight of fear. "Then we'll face it. But not yet. We'll move when the sea hides us again." That night no one slept. The horizon drifted under the pale moonlight, surrounded by darkness and invisible enemies. Every radar pulse, every sonar ping, every gust of wind felt like a warning. The men didn't talk much, but their silence said everything. Fear, duty, and hope all mixed into one. They knew the next few hours would decide everything. What they didn't know was that this was only the beginning of a long and dangerous game, one that would test their courage, their unity, and their will to survive in the face of an unseen enemy. The signal that exposed them was only the start. The real storm was still waiting just beyond the dark horizon. The alarm still echoed faintly in the corridors long after it had been silenced. The tension on board was thick enough to feel in the air, like the calm before a violent storm. Every man and woman on the ship knew what the signal meant. Enemy sensors had detected them. There was no way to hide that truth now. The sound of hurried footsteps filled the narrow passageways as sailors rushed to their stations, their faces pale but focused. The steady hum of machines was replaced by the sharp, nervous clicks of switches and the heavy breathing of the crew. The captain stood in the command room, his face lit by the dim glow of the monitors. His voice stayed calm, though his eyes showed the weight of fear. "No one panics," he said softly but firmly. "We do not give them what they want. Stay quiet. Stay invisible." The communication officer kept his headset on, trying to filter through the noise of incoming signals. Enemy frequencies were alive, short coded transmissions bouncing across the open sea. It was clear that the opposing fleet was in motion. Somewhere out there in the same darkness, a group of warships was aligning, preparing, searching. Down in the engine room, a group of engineers worked without speaking. The air was hot and smelled of oil and metal. They were ordered to reduce the ship's heat signature, to make it appear smaller and colder on enemy sensors. One of them, a young technician barely in his 20s, trembled as he adjusted the cooling valves. His hands shook so much that an older officer had to steady them. "Breathe," the officer whispered. "We've been through worse." But everyone knew that wasn't true. None of them had faced something like this before. The ship was running in near darkness now. All outer lights were off. Every window was covered. No one spoke unless necessary. Even the usual clatter of boots on metal floors was muted. The ocean outside looked endless and black, the waves glimmering faintly under the cold moonlight. Then came the next blow, an alert from the radar team. "Multiple sonar pings incoming," someone reported, his voice trembling. "They're scanning again." The room froze. Sonar pings meant the enemy was actively searching for them, sending sound waves deep into the water to find metal shapes. Every creak of the hull now sounded like a shout. The captain ordered the engines to stop. "Cut propulsion," he said. "Let her drift." The massive warship slowed down until it was just floating, silent like a ghost. The sea took over, rocking it gently from side to side. For the first time in hours, the ship's heartbeat, its engines, was gone. And in that silence, fear grew louder. In the medical bay, a medic tried to calm a sailor who was shaking uncontrollably. He kept muttering, "They know we're here. They're coming." His fear was contagious. The medic could feel her own heartbeat speeding up. She gave him a sedative and then sat quietly beside him, whispering prayers under her breath. Above deck, the lookout crew scanned the horizon with night vision scopes. Tiny dots of light flickered far in the distance, enemy ships moving slowly like predators circling prey. Every few minutes, a flash of light could be seen, maybe from signal lamps or weapon systems being armed. Nobody could tell for sure. Inside the control room, arguments began to rise. The first officer wanted to prepare weapons. "If they fire, we won't have time to react," he warned. "We should arm the systems now." But the captain shook his head. "If we power up weapons, we'll light up their radar like a beacon. They'll know exactly where we are." His voice was steady but strained. "We only fight if they fire first." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Waiting felt worse than fighting. At least in battle, adrenaline gave purpose. But this stillness, this waiting in the dark, felt endless. Hours passed like days. Every few minutes, the sonar operator reported new readings. Still tracking multiple ships. Distance closing slowly. Each word tightened the air even more. The captain didn't move from his post. His hands rested behind his back, his eyes fixed on the radar screen, glowing softly in the dark. Then came a faint vibration, a low, rumbling sound that echoed through the hull. It was coming from the direction of the enemy fleet. The sonar operator stiffened. "Engines. They're accelerating." The message spread across the deck like a spark. Whispers turned into nervous murmurs. The young technician in the engine room whispered to no one in particular, "This is it. They're coming." But still no attack came, just the steady, haunting sound of the ocean and distant engines. It was a game of patience and nerves. Both sides were staring at each other through invisible eyes, waiting for one to make the first move. The crew's nerves began to fray. One sailor couldn't take the silence anymore. He slammed his hand on a table and shouted, "We're sitting ducks! They know where we are!" The captain turned to him sharply but didn't raise his voice. "You're right," he said. "But panic won't save us. It will kill us faster." The sailor lowered his head, ashamed but still trembling. Down in the mess hall, a small group gathered quietly. They didn't eat. They just sat there, listening to the hum of the ship. One of them finally spoke. "If this is the end, I just hope it's quick." Another laughed bitterly, trying to lighten the mood, but no one else laughed. Back on the bridge, the communication team intercepted a clearer enemy message. It was coded, but the words were unmistakable once decoded. "Target confirmed. Awaiting orders." Everyone froze. Those words hung in the air like a knife. The captain closed his eyes for a second, then spoke slowly. "We still have time. They won't move without clearance." He turned to his team. "If they get that order, we'll know before they act. Keep scanning their channels. Every second counts." Outside, the sea began to change. The wind picked up, waves rising slightly, rocking the ship more. Clouds covered the moon, plunging everything into near total darkness. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath. A young officer sitting by the radar whispered to himself, "If we survive this night, I'll never complain about another patrol again." Meanwhile, in the engine room, the chief engineer gathered his team. "If we're ordered to move, we'll need full power in seconds," he said. "But until then, we stay cold. No noise, no vibration." The men nodded, though none could hide the fear in their eyes. The night dragged on, minutes feeling like hours. The captain looked out into the dark sea through the glass. He could see nothing, just a blanket of blackness and the faint reflection of his own face. Somewhere out there, the enemy was watching, listening, deciding. Inside the control room, the air felt heavier. Sweat ran down faces even though the temperature was cool. Every screen glowed faintly in the darkness, showing the same thing, dozens of signals circling them like sharks. Then, for the first time in hours, the radar showed something unexpected. The enemy ships had stopped advancing. Their formation shifted slightly and then stabilized. The captain leaned forward. "What are they doing?" The radar operator checked again. "Holding position, sir. They're not moving closer." The captain didn't relax. He knew this could mean two things. Either they were waiting for attack orders or they were confused, unsure if they had truly found a warship or a decoy. That small uncertainty was their only hope. He turned to his officers. No one moves. Not a sound. We wait, the crew obeyed. The entire ship went silent again, drifting in the dark ocean. The sound of the waves against the hull was the only thing that reminded them they were still alive. Every person on board felt the same cold fear, an invisible enemy, a fragile silence, and the haunting thought that one mistake could end them all. Yet in that moment something changed. The fear slowly began turning into determination. If this was how it ended, they would face it together. The captain finally spoke in a quiet but steady tone. "We hold our ground. They'll blink before we do." His voice gave the crew something to hold on to. Outside, the sea stretched endlessly, the night deep and silent. The ship floated like a lone shadow in a vast, restless world, waiting for dawn or disaster. And though no one said it out loud, every single soul on board knew one thing. This was the longest night of their lives, and it was far from over. The night was deep and endless, stretching across the ocean like a blanket of black glass. The crew of the warship barely spoke anymore. The sound of their own breathing filled the small spaces, mixed with the occasional soft hum of machines still running in low power mode. Every passing minute felt heavier than the one before. They all knew the enemy fleet was close enough that even the smallest mistake could mean being seen. And once they were seen, there would be no turning back. The captain hadn't moved from his position on the bridge for hours. His eyes were fixed on the radar screen, which showed faint moving dots circling in the distance. He didn't need to be told what those dots were. He already knew: enemy warships holding formation, waiting for the order that would change everything. The tension had reached a level where it was almost painful. The silence felt unnatural, almost cruel. Every creak of the hull sounded like a shout. Every faint vibration made someone's heart skip a beat. The crew was doing everything right, but their nerves were stretched thin. The longer they waited, the more unbearable it became. One of the junior officers finally broke the silence. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Sir, what if they're just waiting for dawn?" The captain didn't answer right away. He simply kept watching the radar. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but tired. "Then we make sure dawn finds us alive." Below deck, the atmosphere was even heavier. Some sailors sat quietly near the walls, staring at the floor, lost in thought. Others fidgeted with their gloves or checked their tools repeatedly, not because they needed to, but because doing something kept their hands from shaking. A few whispered prayers under their breath. No one wanted to admit how afraid they were, but everyone could feel it in the air. The sonar operator, who had barely spoken all night, suddenly leaned forward. "There it is again," he whispered. "Short-range pulse, strong this time." The captain turned. "How close?" "Within 6 nautical miles," came the answer. "They're scanning deeper. They're looking for confirmation." The captain closed his eyes for a second, taking a long breath. "They still don't know what we are," he said softly. "That's our advantage. We keep it that way." The crew nodded, though anxiety was etched on every face. Outside, the sea was calm but restless, as if holding its breath. The moon had disappeared behind thick clouds, leaving the waters in near total darkness. The ship looked like a ghost drifting across a black mirror. Somewhere out there, unseen but certain, the enemy was watching. In the engine control room, the chief engineer wiped sweat from his forehead. "All systems holding steady," he whispered to his team. "But we can't stay cold forever. The air filters will start clogging soon." "How long do we have?" asked another crew member. "Maybe 3 more hours before we start suffocating," the engineer replied quietly. "If this standoff goes past that, we'll have to risk turning the systems back on." 3 hours. The captain was informed, and though his expression didn't change, a new layer of worry appeared behind his calm eyes. Every decision now mattered. Every minute could bring salvation or disaster. Time passed slowly. Midnight turned to 1, then 2. The constant low rumble of the enemy engines echoed faintly through the water. It was a reminder. They were surrounded, trapped in a deadly silence. Then suddenly, a new message appeared on the communication monitor. It was intercepted from the enemy's encrypted channel. The operator's hands trembled as he translated the signal. His voice broke slightly when he spoke. "They've confirmed contact again, sir. Still awaiting clearance to engage." That phrase, awaiting clearance, hung in the air like a shadow. It meant they were one order away from destruction. The first officer turned to the captain. "We can't wait for that order, sir. Once it comes, we're finished. We should move before they do." The captain said nothing for a long time. His eyes stayed on the radar, his mind racing. Moving meant exposure, but staying meant waiting for death. Finally, he turned away from the screen. "Not yet," he said. "If they're waiting for confirmation, they're unsure. We use that." He looked toward the sonar team. "Any signs of subsurface movement?" "Negative, sir. No submarines nearby." "Good," the captain said. "If they were certain we're here, they'd already be closing in." The room fell silent again. Every few minutes, someone checked the clock. It was past 3 in the morning now. The captain walked to the small observation window at the side of the bridge. He could see nothing but darkness. Still, he stood there thinking. His breath fogged the glass slightly. Behind him, the crew watched quietly, knowing he was making the hardest decision of his career. Finally, he spoke without turning around. "They'll get their clearance soon. Before that happens, we move." Everyone straightened. The captain turned back to his officers. "But we don't run blindly. We'll slip under the fog bank forming on the western side. If we stay low and silent, we can disappear off their radar." The radar officer checked the readings. "There's a dense patch about 8 miles west, sir. It's moving toward us." "Perfect," the captain said. "When it reaches 2 miles out, we start drifting with the current. Engines stay off until we're inside." The crew began preparing quietly. Orders were whispered. Systems were double-checked. Even in their fear, there was a spark of hope, finally. A plan that didn't end with waiting. As the fog approached, the lookout team could see its faint white mass crawling slowly across the surface of the sea. It looked eerie but beautiful, like a moving wall between life and death. The captain gave the signal. "Release anchors. Let's drift." The engines were kept dead silent. The ship began to move slowly with the current, slipping westward inch by inch. The fog swallowed them gradually, wrapping the ship in thick white mist. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Inside, the crew spoke even softer now. The sonar pulses still echoed faintly, but they seemed weaker, more distant. The enemy was still searching, but the fog and the cold water layers were confusing their sensors. An hour passed. Then another. The tension started to shift from fear to exhaustion. Some sailors leaned against the walls, too tired to stay upright. Others closed their eyes, not to sleep, but to escape their thoughts for a moment. Suddenly, the radar officer leaned forward again. "They're changing course," he said. "All ships turning southeast." The room froze. The captain stared at the radar screen. The dots that had surrounded them for hours were slowly moving away. One by one, they started fading as they went out of range. The communication officer whispered, "Sir, they're leaving." For the first time that night, the captain let out a deep breath. His shoulders lowered slightly, the weight of the night finally easing. "Maintain silence until they're completely gone," he said softly. Minutes turned into an hour, then 2. The enemy fleet's signals grew fainter and fainter until the screens showed nothing but open sea. When the sun finally began to rise, its golden light cut through the fog, bathing the deck in soft warmth. The ocean looked peaceful again, calm and endless, as if the night's terror had never happened. The crew slowly gathered on deck, blinking against the light. Some smiled faintly. Others just stared at the horizon in disbelief. A few sat down quietly, too overwhelmed to speak. The captain stepped out, his eyes scanning the horizon one last time. The sea was clear. The danger was gone. He turned to his crew and said quietly, "We made it." A quiet cheer rippled through the deck, not loud but full of emotion. Some laughed, some cried, some hugged without saying a word. They had survived the longest night of their lives. Down below, the engines were finally restarted. The steady hum returned to the ship, this time sounding like a heartbeat, strong, alive, and steady. The ship began moving forward again, cutting through calm waters. Though the world would never know what had truly happened that night, every person aboard would remember it for the rest of their lives. The endless hours of silence, the waiting, the fear, and finally the dawn that proved they were still alive. It wasn't a story about battle or victory. It was a story about endurance, about human courage in the face of invisible danger. And as the ship moved toward open waters once again, everyone on board felt the same quiet truth inside them. Sometimes survival itself is the greatest victory. The morning light spread slowly across the wide ocean. painting the waves in soft shades of gold and blue. The warship floated quietly, its surface glistening in the gentle sun after a long, sleepless night. No one had truly rested, but as the first rays of light touched the deck, everyone felt a sense of calm that had been missing for hours. The heavy tension that had hung in the air was finally beginning to lift. The crew moved carefully around the deck, speaking in low voices, as if afraid to break the fragile peace that surrounded them. Some leaned against the railings, staring out at the horizon, still half in disbelief that they were alive. The vast ocean stretched endlessly, calm and innocent, hiding the fear and danger that had filled the night. Inside the control room, the captain stood by the large window, looking out over the water. His face was tired, his eyes red from exhaustion, but his expression was steady. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Everyone knew that his calm decisions had saved them from disaster. The ship's instruments showed nothing now, no signals, no threats, no strange noises. For the first time in many days, the radar screens were empty, and the radio channels were silent. A few sailors brought fresh coffee from the galley. The warm smell filled the cold room, mixing with the sound of quiet laughter. The crew began to loosen up, talking softly about how close they had come to being discovered. One of them whispered, "I thought we wouldn't see this sunrise." Another replied with a shaky smile, "We did. That's what matters." Down below in the engine room, the machines had come back to life. The engineers checked every system carefully, running slow power tests. The steady hum of the engines felt like a heartbeat returning after being still for too long. For the first time, the sound brought comfort rather than fear. The young technician who had been trembling the night before sat quietly near a toolbox, rubbing his hands together. The chief engineer walked over, handed him a bottle of water, and said gently, "You did good last night. Fear is normal. What matters is that we didn't give up." The young man nodded silently, his eyes fixed on the floor. On the bridge, the captain gathered the senior officers. "We'll keep our course steady for the next 20 hours, he said. "No signals, no contact until we're well out of this region. Once we're in open waters, we'll report back to command." One of the officers hesitated before asking, "Sir, what about the enemy fleet? Should we log the incident?" The captain looked at the empty horizon for a moment before replying, "We'll report what's necessary. Nothing more." He paused, then added quietly, "Some things are better left between those who lived through them." The officers nodded. They understood. No report could capture what they had gone through. The fear, the silence, the invisible battle that had never truly begun but had almost ended everything. By afternoon, the ship had reached calmer waters. The sky was bright and open with no sign of clouds. The crew began their routine duties again, checking systems, cleaning the decks, recording maintenance logs. Everything felt almost normal, yet a strange quiet still lingered in their hearts. Each person moved with a deeper awareness of how fragile life could be. In the galley, laughter slowly returned. A cook cracked a joke while serving soup, and for the first time in days, people actually laughed out loud. The sound spread through the room, light and warm, washing away the last traces of fear. One sailor lifted his cup and said, "'Tis silence that didn't kill us." The others smiled, raising their cups in response. As evening approached, the sun began to sink into the ocean, setting the sky on fire with shades of orange and red. The captain stood on the upper deck, watching the sunset with a quiet expression. The sound of waves slapping gently against the hull was soothing. He thought about everything that had happened, the night of fear, the steady hands of his crew, and the thin line that had separated them from disaster. A few sailors joined him, standing at a respectful distance. One of them finally spoke. "Sir, do you think they'll ever know how close we were?" The captain smiled faintly. "Maybe, but that's not what matters. What matters is that we stayed calm when fear tried to take over." The sailor nodded. "It didn't feel like courage last night, sir. It felt like survival." "That's what courage really is," the captain said softly. "Doing what you have to even when you're afraid." Night came again, but this time it brought peace, not fear. The stars reflected on the calm water, and the ship's lights glowed faintly, guiding it forward. Inside the sleeping quarters, most of the crew finally found rest. Some fell asleep within minutes, too exhausted to think. Others lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the long night. They remembered the sound of sonar pulses, the silence after each alarm, the captain's voice saying, "We don't panic." Those words had carried them through the darkness. In the middle of the night, the captain went to the bridge again. The officer on watch greeted him quietly. The radar screen still showed only open water. The radio remained silent. He looked at it for a long moment, then turned his gaze to the horizon. The sea looked endless and calm, stretching under the moonlight. "Peaceful, isn't it?" the officer said softly. "Yes," the captain replied, "but never quiet enough to forget what silence can mean." The officer looked at him, not sure what he meant, but the captain didn't explain. He just kept looking at the stars above the ocean, each one shining bright and steady. By morning, the crew received a message from headquarters, simple and direct. They were ordered to continue their patrol on a new route, far from the area of the incident. No mention of the detection, no reference to the fleet that had almost found them. It was as if the night had never happened. The captain read the message and folded it slowly. "Understood," he said. "Plot the new course." The warship turned, cutting through the morning mist. The sea stretched wide and open, endless and free. The wind brushed gently across the deck, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and sunlight. The crew moved with quiet confidence now. They had faced something few could understand, a moment when everything could have ended without a single shot fired. But they had endured. They had held their ground against fear itself. Later that day, as the sun climbed high, the captain walked through the ship. Everywhere he went, he saw faces marked by exhaustion but also strength. A few smiled as he passed, some saluted silently. He stopped for a moment near the observation deck, where a group of young sailors were watching the waves. One of them said softly, "Sir, it feels strange. The sea looks so calm now, like nothing ever happened." The captain nodded. "That's the sea for you. It hides everything it wants to forget." The sailor smiled faintly. "Do you think we'll ever forget it?" The captain's eyes stayed on the horizon. "No," he said quietly. "And that's a good thing." The warship sailed on, leaving a faint trail of white foam behind it. The ocean around them sparkled, endless and bright, as if welcoming them back into its vastness. The sky above was clear, and for the first time in a long while there was no shadow of fear. Yet somewhere deep inside every person on that ship, the memory of that night would always live. The sound of the sonar, the trembling silence, the invisible danger, and the quiet courage that had kept them alive. No one would ever write it down in a report. No medals would be given. But they all knew what it meant to survive the night when enemy sensors detected their ship and panic swept across the fleet. It wasn't a story of war or victory, it was a story of people, of human hearts standing steady in the face of fear. And as the ship disappeared slowly into the golden horizon, the sea itself seemed to whisper the truth of it. Sometimes the greatest battles are the ones fought in silence.